Hi, everyone. On our last episode of Design After Class, we heard from the career consultants, the people who study how designers break in. Today, we flipped it. Our guest is someone who is living it right now. Emily Marzocchi graduated not too long ago, packed her bags from Italy, and landed a job in one of the most iconic studios on the planet, Foster and Partners in London. We all know the name. She's going to tell us what actually got her hired. Spoiler, it wasn't a perfect cover letter. But before we get there, let me introduce today's host. French designer Delphine Leon trained at Camondo School in Paris and has been running her own practice for nearly 30 years, working across the globe from high-end residential to retail, offices, and hospitality. Her portfolio includes names such as Hermès, Chopard, Club Med, and yes, she's one of the rare designers who has designed an hotel across an entire island in the Maldives. On top of that, Delphine funded the Live Design Project, a platform putting junior designers in the driver's seat on real projects with real client and real mentorship. Today, Delphine is Emily's host, and honestly, ours too. This new episode of Design After Class brings together two designers, two careers, and one conversation worth hearing before your next interview. So let's dive in.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily, for taking the time to be with us today and take time to explain about your story to our young designers. For all of you guys, Emily Marzocchi, she's a young designer. She's coming from Italy, but she works now in London. She's specialized in hospitality and she is designing at Foster and Partners. Before we get into your background, Emily, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing the night before your first day at Foster and Partner, what would it be?
Well, let's say that personally, biggest anxiety is not so much the day before work as much as the day before the interview. So the day before work, I would say the day before the first day of work, I would say relax and keep an open-minded. Open-minded approach is the best thing because I think the first day when you walk into a new office, you just somehow my brain starts thinking, I need to straight on get into the things of, learning and getting into the team and all that. But in reality, that's not what you do in the first day. It never is. You sort of get acquainted, you get introduced. You never really start work full on. But I think my brain forgets that. I keep on forgetting that. And my mindset is completely different and it's not so open-minded and so ready to meet people as much as it's focused into start getting into work. But I think the better approach is starting a slow start, an excited start, but a slow start that eases you into the workflow and all that. So
that's not gonna overwhelm you, right?
Exactly. I think that's a very important part, especially personally. The day I started at Foster and Partners, the night before, I had a fire in my house, so we had to call. This was at like 2 a.m. We had to call the fire department. We had to do all of those things. So I had to go straight from the hospital because then they took us to the hospital for testing and all that. And then I went straight to work. So actually, when I started with Foster and Partners, I was very calm. It was refreshing, really. So personally, that was a very calm first day compared to whatever else was happening in our life.
If you want to take me back to the beginning and not the Polish version, the real one, you study interior design. At what point did you realize this was actually what you wanted to do with your life? And was there a moment of doubt where you nearly went a different direction?
So I think I had a few moments where I was like, this is actually the coolest job in the world. One of them, I think it was my first job. That was GA Design Group. First job in the UK, that is, after university. And this hotel opened. There was a big hotel, the Atlantis the Royal in Dubai. And the opening ceremony was held by Beyonce, and there were a bunch of people and there were a bunch of people, famous artists that I followed since I was a child, and they were all there, and they posted photos on their Instagram and all that, and I thought, this is so cool. My job is so cool.
I love my job.
I love my job. I am doing the coolest job in the world. I think that was one of the and I sent screenshots of the stories of these artists that me and my friends used to follow when we were teenagers. And I sent it to them and I was like, can you believe that they posted the hotel that my studio was working on?
Wow.
Isn't that so cool? I mean, I sit next to the guy that designed the place, that, helped build it and all. Yeah, that was one of the big moments that I thought, wow, this is
Yeah,
really.
I completely relate to what you say because I remember the first job I had in the Maldives, fantastic, beautiful paradise islands. And after a day at sight, I was sitting on the beach looking at the sea and thinking, my God, I have the best job ever. So I relate completely. So talking about hospitality design, especially, that's a choice, right? So a lot of graduates default to residential or workplace because that's what they see most usually. So what pulled you exactly towards hotel and hospitality spaces?
I think right out of uni, I kind of fell into it. It's one of those things that you don't really know what you're getting yourself into, and you know, you just you just try it out. And I think, as most other students, when I graduated, what I wanted to do was retail, things, because that seems to be the most, the coolest place to be. However, I fell into the hospitality side of design, and I kind of fell in love with it from then on. There's an amount of very interesting projects that happen within the hospitality industry, and the hospitality industry really covers so many things. It's the kind of the sweet spot in between so many other branches of design that really teaches you how to approach so many other things just by doing the one. You can high-end residential as well as when you do hospitality. You get to do restaurants because, usually that's also part of a hotel. You get to do spas because that's also part of a hotel. So you kind of get to do every bit of design, and you get to learn how to approach. And then it's just easier after you've done a bit of all to then, if you want to, narrow down to the one thing or not, and just stay into the wider, branch of it. I was lucky enough to fall into it, to have fun into it, and then I just stayed.
Right. And for Foster and Partners, so let's talk about that decision, right? That's not a studio you stumble into. It's one of the most recognized names in the industry globally. So, two questions in one. Why them specifically? And what was it about their work that made you want to be in that room?
There's, I think, many reasons. I've started studying interior design when I was about 14 in Italy, because we start specializing when we're very young in high school. So I've studied Fosters in, architecture and interior design books since, I was at very young age. And it's one of those places that you really look up to. You learn how to, really appreciate and recognize, traits of the, architecture as well as design, that you really are like, oh, that's clearly a Foster design. And then when you get into work, obviously you get to, you know, you start meeting a lot of other firms and all that. But the things that you studied when you were so young really like stick with you. It's a very international studio. There's people from all over the place, even though London already is like that. But Foster being such a big studio is twice as much like that. So what I really appreciate is the amount of different experiences I get to encounter every day, from different people, from different backgrounds. And it's really enriching in terms of just, as much culturally as much as, professionally, to be around such different people that came from such different backgrounds. It's one of those places that you need to experience once in a lifetime, big studios like that, because you also learn if you're made for such big studios or not, because it's not for everyone at all. They're very corporate that way, but you get a very big intel in how, what's behind such a big operation, and you really learn to appreciate what went behind, what is going behind, behind closed doors. You really come to appreciate what an amazing team of people works relentlessly to make such a big machine work.
What did you think actually got you noticed among what I imagine was an enormous pile of applications? I receive a pile, so I can just only imagine what they receive.
Oh, well, I don't know for sure. I wish I inquired, actually. But I think there's a layer of personality that transpires through portfolio that really catches. Sometimes it's not even something that is tangible as much as it is just a personality that just transpires through like the way you layer a presentation or projects into, a page that really comes across. Sometimes it's just the right timing. I think most times is all of those things put together. You need to be at the right time, in the right place, as well as, with the right skills.
But there was nothing specific in the way you applied, or you didn't know anyone in particular.
No, I didn't know anyone
No,
when I first applied. I applied through, the usual LinkedIn
Okay.
advertisements that most companies do. I applied. I actually was enabled to apply through that. I sent them an email and I thought, there's no chance they're ever going to reply to me from an email. Yeah, right. It was one of those HR emails. If you can't apply through the website, just let us know and we'll be of your assistance. Obviously, they would never reply to me. Turns out they replied to me, less than 24 hours after. We scheduled an interview. And I think that's really where I shine the brightest, let's say. I think that's most people that have quite an outgoing personality as mine is. We shine way brighter when it comes to interviews because, my personality comes across way more, and it is part of what I bring to the table, I think, in a team. That I think really counts as much as the skills, obviously, that I bring to the team. But I think personality is something that is very important for jobs like ours, because obviously we are relating to other people at all times. It's never a lonely job. Yeah.
Okay, well, for those who don't know, I got to meet Emily via NEWH, which is a fantastic program. Emily, maybe you want to talk a little bit about it and how you got involved into NEWH?
Yes, that would be my pleasure. So NEWH is a nonprofit organization that fundraises through the organization of events and through the tickets. There's a big pot that gets saved for students. Every year we have scholarship for hospitality management for the UK branch, but it's widespread international chapters that happen, and they all have their own events. And yes, so there's a Paris chapter, there's a Milan chapter, a London chapter, and there's a very, very big chunk of the NWH that is developing over, and it was born in the US. So all the pot that gets collected and fundraised through the year gets saved for the scholarships that are organized for interior design and hospitality management students. So that's how I get to know the NWH. I was a second year student at the university in London, and it was summer, and my professor sent through this opportunity. It was a competition that was going to run through over a month, and then there was going to be a presentation day. And this was right after COVID. And I was like, yeah, why not? Let me try it. I was working full time in a showroom at the time as well. So I would wake up at like 5 a.m., start doing this competition brief. We had a brief and a project develop. And then I would work throughout the day. And then I would come home at about 7 p.m., do some more work, and then go to bed, and then wake up day after. And this repeated and repeated over for a month. I was exhausted by the end of it, but I was able to present and I was able to win. And through that, one of the judges of the competition offered me a job, and that was GA Design Group. And from then on, I just happened to stick to hospitality because the best place to be.
Exactly. And it works for you. So well done. The application reality check, because this is one of the problems that juniors have today. So we already have a webinar that we run with Gita and Andrew, made on things very clear that students don't hire potential, they hire risk reduction. So they hire the person who will protect the deadline, the budget, the relationship, and the reputation. So this is what they told us about. So let's talk about your portfolio. And I want to get in the specific. There's a framing I find really useful. Your portfolio isn't what you made. It's why someone should bet on you. So looking back at your portfolio that got you into Foster and Partners, or it could be anywhere else, was it the visual that did the work, the storytelling, the way you showed your process, or something else entire? What do you think?
I think it's a mix of everything. I think the key of a portfolio is finding the sweet spot. I think it's never, one of those things that most people do, most especially juniors do, is that they narrow down and they really milk the one skill. But a designer really needs to fit in many, many different shoes. And I think that's an essential thing that you really need to show in your portfolio, that you know how to do this and a bit of that and a bit of something else. So sketching, might it be 3D design, might it be using CAD and developing plans, as well as just technical drawings itself. And I think the issue is that most students almost tailor a portfolio a little bit too much, where it becomes a bit too narrow in the skill that they're showing and the repeated skill that they're showing, that makes it a little less for an employer to be like, okay, so this is a very specialized person, this one very thing, but not, do they know how to do anything else, or do they only know how to do 3D visuals, you know? And I think in terms of when I make my portfolio, is a lot more trying to show a lot of different skills, as well as trying to show this the concrete skills of relating with consultants, for example, because that's a part of our job as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so it might be that I put a 3D visual that I didn't do, but I specify that I didn't do this 3D visual, but I had to work with a 3D designer to develop this visual. And then the skill that comes from that is, the explaining of what we're trying to obtain, the collection of materials for them to develop a certain kind of visual. So it's really about thinking a little bit outside the box, not just repeating the same skill over and over again is something that is very essential for a portfolio, I think. Keeping a person interested, then mostly it.
And knowing that, what you just said, what would you remove from it today? Is there anything you would remove, knowing that what you know now?
That's an interesting question. I do have a part of my portfolio that is very much for myself. There's a part of my portfolio that involves the NWH and the work I do with it. And I know that a lot of employers might not, and I've debated removing it for a long time, and thinking maybe this is not something that they care about. The work that I do with students as part of the NWH, helping young designers step into the industry and all that. But then I just realized that's such an important part of me that even if they don't care, they can just scroll through. I just think it's a very important part. It's at the end of the portfolio. You can close the portfolio if you're bored. But I think it's something that is very important about what I bring to the table, is the way I'm very willing to teamwork. I'm very willing to step and help other members of the team without, thinking twice about it. And I think that's very much one of the things that I love about the NWH and the work I do with it. And I think it's very important that I put it into my portfolio, whether people care or not.
I think it's really good. It's actually very good. And I think people within the industry will understand that. And what about the cover letter? Is it worth it? Because on our last podcast, Gita Dar gave a piece of advice that divided the room, basically. Write a specific cover letter for every single application, referencing a real project from the studio's portfolio, showing you understand what they actually do. Not I love your work, obviously, but evidence that you really looked. Did you do that?
I don't think I ever wrote a cover letter. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
I know that that is advice. That's advice that I received in the past, especially at university. That's what they've always said. Show that you care and really, to kind of shine compared to the others. Maybe that's true. I just never found that it was really useful for me. I think that's a big request. I think that's an insane request in the job market like it is today to ask for a student that applies to about, I had classmates of mine that applied to about 50 to 100 jobs per week. To ask someone to research every per week. It's
That's a lot.
basically by the end of, throughout a summer, they applied to, you know, every company in London. And whether one might say if they just paid a little more attention to what, each application, maybe they wouldn't have had to apply to so much. But when you get to a point where universities kind of throw out about 50 students all at the same time, each university for each interior design and interior architecture course, you kind of are fighting for just a bunch of spots.
Very limited space.
That's it. So sometimes, you got to pick your battle. Sometimes it's about being the fastest to get there. And sometimes it's about being the most detailed. I think, though, asking somebody to tailor a cover letter as much as tailor a portfolio, because that's also something that is quite discussed. Tailor a portfolio per firm. It's, to me, a little bit of a ridiculous ask. It's kind of insane considering the amount of time that takes. I mean, yeah, maybe cover letter it could be, but in my experience, I actually don't think anybody. I did maybe send a couple at the very beginning, but I don't think nothing ever came from it. Actually, every job I've ever gotten was never, with the cover letter involved into any bit of the process. So,
Interesting.
yeah, personal opinion. Unless
That's what I'm asking.
yeah, unless there's, you've tried every other thing and maybe you want to give that a try, yeah, why not? But there's so many other things that are more important, I think, than a cover letter. And I think maybe part of the CV. In my CV, I have a little paragraph where I explain myself, where I talk about myself. And I think that's about enough. And if they're interested, because about the cover letter, yeah, sure. It's just, I mean, the CV and the portfolio you send is just about the first impact you make on a person. And then if they're interested at all, they're gonna call you in an interview. And then you can, talk for an hour about whatever you're interested in and whatever you bring to the table. I think that's way more valuable than, explaining your whole life in, 20 lines,
Fair enough. Well, and explaining that, what about the interview itself? Walk me through your most successful interview. Not the one where you got the job necessarily, but or yes, but the one where you walked out feeling like you had shown exactly who you are. What did you do differently in that one?
I think I haven't had too many interviews in my life, thankfully, I must say, because it's quite of a painful process, that. But I think I try to be quite true to myself and what I bring to the table. I am quite straightforward as a person. I don't really hide behind anything or any words. I am very straightforward with the way I say things and my opinions, for better or for worse. I think the best interviews I've had are the ones where I really didn't keep anything inside. I was very clear with my, what my intentions were, with my future as well as with, my time at the company. And I think that's when you leave and you're the happiest about what you've expressed. And then if it goes through, well. If it doesn't, but in my experience, it always did. So maybe there is something to it.
Well, you must be
quite true.
dude. It's not only luck.
Maybe. I think it's just I think people can just sense when you're talking truth or try not to be rude. What I'm
no,
saying. But if you're not, if you're telling the truth and you're really showing your true self, people will see it. And if you're lying, people either see you on the spot or they will notice as soon as you start working. So
yeah, for sure.
that's it. So I think showing your true self, for better or for worse, maybe somebody's like, okay, well, I don't like this person, I'm not going to hire her. And that maybe is for the best because that means you just don't fit in the team. It never is personal. It's just about, is this person going to fit in the team or not? It's not about something personal. They don't like you or whatever. It never is that because to an employer, for the most part, the seniors or whatever, you don't have to work with very specific, especially in a big company. You don't work with the person that hires you very much. It's mostly them trying to understand if you're going to be a good addition to the team. Are you going to you're going to create problems in terms of just relating to your other team members. If you're going to be a good addition, an easy addition, somebody that will contribute, there should, be no problem with that, I don't think.
And there's a question I always ask designers. Did you ask for feedback at the end of the interview? Because I think that's one of the most underused moves a junior designer has, basically.
Yeah, I agree. No, I never did. And
But thinking about it now, would you do it?
thinking about it now, I think, to be honest, this is gonna sound very bad, but every interview I've had went through successfully. So maybe if it didn't, maybe I would have been a bit upset of not having asked for, helpful, review of my not my performance so much, but my, whatever could have been better or whatever. But because every interview I've had went through successfully, I think I just did a good job. But yeah, it's always good to ask, just because even if you are doing a good job, to be honest, you can do better. Fair enough. And in future, absolutely. But I think in the heat of the moment, I just don't really think anymore. I just react very, you know, very much to what the situation is. And to be honest, to me, interviews are really not so much about them interviewing me. I go in instead of me being the one interviewing them. And what I want from it is having a conversation with this other person that is in front of me and understand what are they like. Because most likely the colleagues that work with them are going to be like them or similar to them. My main point is I really want to understand what kind of person you are, because that's going to tell me a lot about the rest of the company.
Yeah.
So, I go geared up. I go ready for, to find out every bit about the company. It's not really about, to me, it's not really about finding feedback for myself as much as finding everything I can about
the company.
yes, the company, the people, the approach to design as well as to other people and team members. Yeah, it's a lot about that.
Talking about the first job reality, what's the gap between school and studio? Where did it
Yeah.
actually hurt the most? Because at school, you're trained to apply a creative process, right? You learn the softwares, you present your ideas, but nobody tells you about the pace, the hierarchy, the fact that your opinion as a junior is one voice among many experienced ones. So,
Yeah.
what did really differ most from what you expected?
What hurt the most is you work it so hard, and as a member of, most times amazing teams, all working together to then present to a client that doesn't appreciate what you're doing, and having to go, you know, doing a 180 spin, and doing a completely different approach. And then next time again, doesn't work out. And then you do another 180 and trying to work out what a client wants when they're not actually telling you what they want, which is quite different from university, because at university you are your own client for the most part. And just it kind of sometimes feels a bit like throwing away a piece of design that works perfectly and it's amazing, and you're kind of throwing it away for something that doesn't look good, but then it does look good because you make it look good. And that's a challenge. That's the challenge. But every time it happens, it's just so painful that you're, throwing away such amazing work to do something that you're like, oh, come But then it comes out as an amazing result again, because you are a great designer and you are working in a great team, and it just works out to be, again, an amazing product. But every time it's a painful step that I just still haven't gotten used to, I don't think. I am still.
Fair enough. I don't think anyone gets used to that, but that's a very important part of the business reality, actually. Unfortunately.
It really is.
Mm.
Yeah. I think that, alongside the specification of materials and the budgeting of things, it's really something that they don't teach you at university, unfortunately, and I think it's quite essential for the job. It's one of those things that when they tell you this is not a very high budget job, but you have no idea what that means. It's just, so what does that mean? So I can't basically cut a full mountain and have everything in marble. Okay, got that, but then between having hardwood and laminate or whatever, you don't know what the difference is. So that comes with experience, but that would be very, very useful knowledge to have before starting, because I feel kind of hits you in the face without any warning, and you're like, I'm helpless now. What's happening?
Well, I think everyone in their first real job has a moment, right, or several, where they feel like they're completely out of their depth and that everyone around them knows something they don't. Can you give me a concrete example of when that happened to you, if it did, and what you actually did in that moment? Not what you should have done, what you really did.
I think there's so many different things that can happen in a design process that, when you first start and you do a project from the beginning to the end, and you're like, okay, now I know how that's going to work. And then you get into the second project and something else goes wrong that you thought, oh, but hold on. In this stage before, something went wrong and I fixed it. So this time I approached it from the other side because I thought that wouldn't have created a problem, and yet a problem occurs of some kind or the other. And you just look around at times and you're just like, why did nobody go crazy by now? Because they have done about 1 million projects and every time something goes wrong. And I think it just makes you think, what is going on? Why am I going insane trying to fix a problem that clearly was such an issue that could have been avoided? And yet you sort of get to a point where you realize that there's so many things that could go wrong at times. And yes, the more senior you are, the more you're going to see these things coming and try to avoid issues. And that's kind of the job of a project manager. But as a junior, these things really hit you without expecting it. And I think the more you go on, the more you realize that's just how the industry is and how how it happens. And you just need to find a way to learn as much as you can from everything that goes wrong every time it does, and try to find solutions to the problem, because when you're going to be the one in charge, you're going to have to be the one finding solutions and avoiding problems from the start.
And we touched a little bit about receiving feedback very quickly about the interview, but there's a specific tension in design that I don't think gets talked about enough. You spend years developing a point of view, visual language, a sense of taste, and then you walk into a studio where a senior designer or a client will tell you that something you believe it isn't working, right? How
Yeah.
did you learn to take that feedback without it either crushing your confidence or making you blindly compliant? Where's the line?
It really depends where you went to university, because I think the approaches at different universities around the world are a little bit different. But in the architecture and design industry, there's a lot of fight you go through with your professor. You need to stand by your project and you need to stand by your idea. And I think when you start working, when you start working in the field, you need to, and that you learn by the seniors, above you, that where you would be fighting for everything, just learn that what they're doing is picking the right fight. You can't fight everything with a client, or with, you can't fight everything they think or they say, or there's some fights you can pick and say, no, I think this is the right choice, actually. I don't think whatever you're saying is right. But you can't say it for everything, because objectively that wouldn't be true. And I think whenever it happens to you and whenever it happened to me, it did crush me a little bit. But I think you just need to find the strength that or you can do better, and you know better, and not know better necessarily of another person, you just know that you can do better. And in future, just apply whatever you've learned in that occasion, but never give up. If a colleague of yours or a company that you work at doesn't agree with your method or whatever you think because of whatever reason, and you think that's, you know, that kind of crushes you whenever they say that to you, and then you kind of realize that whatever you know until now and whatever you've experienced until now was completely working for the company you were working at before. That just means that there's so many different methods that would work for one company and not another. So maybe you're just in the wrong place. You know, sometimes it's about trying, not just giving up like that, but trying. And if it doesn't work, it maybe is just a difference in approaches that you just don't agree with the company that you're working with. Specifically, obviously, if it's a client, it's a different approach because you can't just leave it. It's not as easy. But if it's a company that you're encountering and it's really hard to work with, and you might not be fitting in the way they think. Sometimes, yes, you try to fight the urge of, going your own way, and you try to adapt, but sometimes you just can't. And sometimes you just need to call it a day, I think, and just realize that there's so many projects in the world, so many types of design in the world, so many companies in the world that you can be fit for all. It just doesn't work. And you just need to find the right place and try not to get that to kill your spirit in the way, I think.
Yeah, I always tell my junior to, they have to fight for their battle. They have to decide which one to pick. And whatever they fight is not about a fight, is explaining their point with,
Absolutely.
very precise, precisely documented, I would say, to try to make the other person change their mind. If
Yeah.
they don't, at the end of the day, if they are the person above, the senior, or if they are the client, they have the last word. So you have
Yeah.
to adapt to them. So
Yeah. I think it's a lot about what kind of person as well you're working with. A very, let's say open-minded person, and person that is willing to because you get some seniors that are just like, oh, I'm above you, whatever I say it's right. Unfortunately, that is the case. But most people in the industry are very nice, and we all work as a team. It doesn't matter that you're a junior or I think when you're a junior, yes, whenever you suggest something, you need to take into consideration that the person in front of you has had enough experience to be able to tell certain decisions are right or wrong from the beginning, even before they get suggested. But also you shouldn't be afraid of, not offering, the option
absolutely not.
or whatever the idea you had, because sometimes the fresh mind is the one that thinks outside the box, because sometimes you're put in such a small box for so many years that sometimes the obvious resolution is right in front of our eyes, and we just don't see it because we've always looked at it from the same. One very good advice I've had at university from my professor was that sometimes when you look at a plan for too long, it just doesn't make any sense anymore. You just need to flip it upside down and see if it works. And you'd be surprised how easy it is to tell when there's a mistake whenever you just flip the plan upside down and you're like, wow, this clearly doesn't work. But it's something that your eyes stopped seeing at this point because you worked on it for months or years sometimes, and you just don't see the mistakes. And all of a sudden you just flip the plan upside down and you're like, oh, this part doesn't work. As easy as that. And then it avoids a lot more pain and steps for everybody to just go through it again and just notice the mistake or not notice the mistake and go through the next stages with a mistake that is so glaringly obvious, and then the whole thing looks like you're all a bunch of newbies that never worked on a plan before, because everybody stared at the same thing for so long that you're just it's almost you can't really notice anything in it anymore.
I do the same kind of tricks, but it's a different one, but it's when it's in 3D. So I design the plan and I put it in 3D, but I never apply any material or color. I always keep the first 3D in black and white, because if it works in black and white, the rest is easy. So, you have your
Yeah,
upside down.
in color it's gonna look better.
Exactly. But sometimes it's just, you're polishing, but it doesn't make it work. It looks good,
Yeah.
but it doesn't make it work. So yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. Yeah, but you were talking about school, and actually, if I ask you to do the list of 3 things your training prepared you for really, really well at school, and the 3 things it left completely unprepared for, what will it be? 1, 2, 3.
I think 3 things that I was prepared for were programs. I was very good. I learned very well how to use computer programs. Let it be Photoshop, let it be AutoCAD. Obviously, not a master at that point, because when you actually meet somebody that has been working on AutoCAD since the beginning of it, you actually are mind blown, because that's a completely different breed of people. They're magical. They're wizards. Programs, I think it's something that the younger generations really can bring to the table, because we're born as designers with programs inbuilt into us and our training. So
Absolutely.
I think it's something that is very useful to bring to the table and learn as many as possible. Another thing that I learned very well from university is relating to people. There was a big part of it, of being in such a international university, that really prepared me for working with such international people, where sometimes you're a bit biased, or you're a bit, you somehow think that certain, you know, people are able to do certain things in a different way rather than whatever you expect them to do. I think you just learn how many different things different people can bring to the table. It really is magical, and it's essential. And that's the reason why I love London so much, is because the amount of people that are
Yeah.
here really make. And I know that Paris is exactly the same in that way. There's the the amount of people that bring in such different experiences you really only experience in very few cities. And you really find the importance so much that now, if I go to a studio where there's not so much diversity in terms of people, I find that it's very bland. It's just not interesting enough. Not just interesting in terms of whatever comes out of the project, but not interesting in terms of my day-to-day relation to, the learning experience, even just learning about other people's countries, and then, other people's designs in terms of what their country is doing in terms of architecture and design. It's amazing, and you just don't see it in social media, or in the zine and stuff like that, because it's very Europe centered, and America, it's not necessarily as interested in covering other sides of the world that are doing just as many amazing things. And you wouldn't meet this kind of people and cultures otherwise. And I think that's what uni prepared me for.
And what about the thing they didn't prepare you for? I mean, the things
Oh
that.
boy, hierarchies.
Okay.
Hierarchies I wasn't prepared for. Sometimes you need to learn how to shut up. Also not very easy for me. Right time, right place is definitely something that I'm still trying to figure out, because sometimes you just need to just shut up, wait how the thing plays out, and just understand that there's a reason why the project manager is saying something at that very specific moment, and just not fighting it for a reason or another. I think that's quite important. There's a big list of things that I think, it's no fault of the university. I just think that there's so much to this world that you can't just ask 3 years or 5 years of university to teach you something that people have learned in 10, 20 years of experience. You just have to live through it. Even if they try to teach you that, you will not be able to, you will not be able to apply it as much as you do when you actually work your way through it at work.
Well, and honestly, I still, after 28 years of experience, I'm still learning every day. So it's and that's
That's
the beauty
it.
of the
That's the
job.
beauty of it.
So, mm,
It would be so boring otherwise. If you knew
absolutely.
everything already, then what would be the point? It would be really, really boring, I think. So I have no interest. When the time I get bored, that's the time I leave the industry, I think. Because
Well, you won't. You won't. Trust me, you won't.
that's it. Perfect. That's all I need to know.
And talking about hospitality design specifically, what makes hospitality design different and harder? You know, from the outside, designing a hotel room might sound like the dream brief: beautiful materials, a generous budget, interesting clients. I mean, that's at least that's what people think. But from the inside, what actually makes it different from other types of interior design? You know, is it the scale of it, the number of stakeholders involved, or the fact that the space has to work for thousands of different people every single day, from operation to client, by the way?
I think yeah, that's one big part of it is the amount of people you need to just in the design part of it, how many people you need to make happy. You know, let it be the operator, let it be the client, and which are usually the two that are the most important in the whole situation. Stakeholders, yes, of course. Uh, but I think as well the size of the projects and the timeline. I think the timeline is really hard because for years and years you're designing something that doesn't exist, something that will not come to completion sometimes for about 12 years.
Yep.
Especially new build hotels and all that. That I think is something that is really hard for your brain
To process.
to process. All the work that is going to something that is not real until it is. But at the beginning, for a lot of years, it's not, and you're working on one project, and then that kind of goes on hold, and the construction drawings being developed, but they kind of like fades away, and you then start working on a different project for a bunch of years, and then that fades away, and the other one picks up again, and then stuff gets interesting again, and and then there's the purchasing part of things and the finalizing the mock-up rooms and all that. But at the beginning stages, when you're just keep on doing hard work and see nothing coming out of there, I think it's really hard, and it's I think that's what sets apart the hospitality industry from retail, which is a very fast-paced industry. In terms of the building of it, it's very fast. It's you get the project, you start, presentation, concept, blah 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 blah. It's all like coming in a span of a year. The project started and finished and was taken down already. Sometimes it's way faster than hospitality is, and
It is.
yeah, it's quite complicated for your brain more than anything.
Here's a tension I see in hospitality design specifically. The space has to be beautiful enough to set in the campaign image, for example, but it also has to survive 10 years for operational reality, right? So staff moving through it, guests using it in ways it was never designed for example, furniture that gets replaced because the budget ran out. How do you hold both of those things at once? And your answer to that changed since you started working.
I think I've always been a functional person, as in one goes towards the functionality of things before the look of it. Yes, the look of it needs to be there, of course, don't get me wrong. But I think above all, the key of design is finding the most functional way to do the most beautiful thing. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter that it looks good, it will never work. If it doesn't work from the beginning, it would never work afterwards. And I think so functionality is the key. Now, there is many ways to make something functional and beautiful. It's a painful process where you need to explore and explore and explore and explore, but then you'll get there, and it always works out that way. But I think there's a lot of the skills of a designer is not just being able to design on the spot, but it's being able to think ahead 10 years, 15, well, it's almost never 15, but let's say 15. It's quite never that long, but you need to think about, whatever, even it's going to be beautiful in 10 years, something that doesn't age badly, because sometimes you see hotels that just open that already aged so badly, not just the finishes itself, it's the design itself was maybe beautiful 10 years ago, but now we already got sick of it. Let's say like finishes that didn't wear out. No, it's just the look of them that are just slightly overdone, that maybe 10 years ago was something that everybody was doing, and 10 years later it's now something that is so boring and seen so often that it really is not interesting as a design anymore, even though the hotel just opened. Yeah, I think you need to be able to develop and your brain to be quite flexible that way and not get stuck with, you see so much stuff, so much content and so much product, that you really need to be able to assess good quality and good design, and timelessness of the design, rather than, falling into the, oh, that's a beautiful thing, but then is it gonna age well? Are you get bored of it 2 days in, or 5 years? So
Timeless is a key
timeless is a key, and it's such a difficult one as well, because what is timeless, Arguably nothing, and yet some pieces are. But then if everybody starts using the same pieces, then they stop being timeless? Do you get bored of them? So
Yeah, and timeless is also, like we know that designs are coming back on fashion every 10 to 12
yeah,
years. There is a repeat. So what timeless means what? What's the base? So it's
exactly.
a difficult topic. But let's talk about confidence, because I think it's a little bit misunderstood. So when you're a junior, confidence can feel like something other people have and you don't yet. But I'd push back on that framing. Can you think of a specific moment in your first year? Like, can be a project, a meeting, a feedback, where something shifted, where you stopped feeling like you were performing competence and started actually feeling the competence.
I think I actually am quite a confident person. I think I started off getting into the workplace being like, I know everything. I know what's best. And then from there, you just learn that you don't. So I think I started the opposite way around personally. And then you kind of, there's starting with a big confidence, and then kind of it fades out from there. And then it's the gaining it back. That is the key. That was the key in my case. And I think it's mostly just by being very self-aware and seeing how you yourself deal with situations. A situation that you notice, this is throughout the years, but you notice that you would have dealt very differently the year before. It's not necessarily one episode that happens. I think it's something that builds slowly and then you get given more responsibility, and you get to deadlines that you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna deal with this. I don't know, how, and then you do, and then you're like, okay, thinking back at it, I'm fine. I can deal with this. And that kind of builds your confidence. Next time situation like that is about to happen, you're like, I'm fine. It's gonna be tough, but I'll know how to deal with it. I will figure it out. So I think it's more of a process than something that just happens overnight, I think, or just that I've never really realized it overnight, but definitely is a process that takes a bit of time. But everybody, I
does.
think, gets there sooner or later.
Good. Emily, I know you've given us a lot of time already, so I have two more questions if you don't mind. And these are more practical advice, for the juniors. The one thing you'd fix in most junior portfolios. So if you could look at the portfolio of a
Yeah.
young designer applying to studios like yours right now, what's the single most common mistake you'd expect to see, and what would you tell them to change in that case?
When I see portfolios, and I do see a lot of student portfolios because I happen to, offer my opinion very often to whoever wants to, send me their stuff across on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm very happy. Look, I'll do anything to help, really. And whatever I see most often is these renders. For somebody that wants to be an interior designer, scenes, showing pages and pages and pages of 3D renders when you're not a visual artist. And you don't want to be a visual artist. That is the thing. Is that yes, you're trying to show a skill, but you're showing pages and pages of the same skill. it's not a skill that usually it's a skill that relates to interior designers. It's usually a skill that is very connected to visual artists rather than interior designers. So I think a big mistake is not listening to the professors when they give you advice, because I remember hearing a lot of advice about, not doing this very specific thing at university, and yet I had a lot of classmates. I remember that I had exactly that. Classmates that kept on showing the same skill and kept on refusing to put skills like sketching or finished work they didn't want to show. And yet that's one of those things that companies really, I believe, benefit, or I bet really benefit in seeing into somebody else's brain. When I see how they sketch and how they approach a situation, that tells me way more than seeing somebody's 3D render that right now really could be done by AI, and I barely would be able to tell the difference. So
Yeah.
I think, yes, showing skills is very important. Showing that you know how to do renders, for sure, very important. However, to me, what's more important is seeing how you think and how you approach the brief in terms of sketches. To me, that's very important because it's very useful. It really transpires, and it also shows that you know how to think in the spot. And if you sometimes when I try to explain myself, my colleagues maybe don't understand me, and I can just sketch it on a piece of paper and like, this is how it works. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what you mean. Okay, of course, of course. And that happens on the daily. We sketch on random pieces of paper on the daily. And it's an essential tool just for two team members to talk to each other.
Yeah.
To just figure out. Sometimes it's just figuring out a piece of joinery together. It's just like, okay, but how does this stand? And we just sketch over each other and trying to one with a black pen, the other one with a red pen, trying to, intertwine in their pen marks just to figure out one piece of joinery. And it's essential that you know how to do this kind of things because otherwise, how would you deal with that situation when you can't explain yourself and you don't know how to draw?
That's a very good advice. That's a very, very good advice. And now, if you think about yourself, the version of yourself in 5 years, not the studio name, not the project type, what kind of designer do you want to be in 5 years?
What I've always been drawn to is doing something that is useful to other people. I've always found very interesting the branch of design that covers the hospitality towards the hospital side of hospitality, and something that is way more in contact with people that are in needs as much as education side of things, and the hospitality that goes quite along with psychology. I think that's something that would make me feel quite accomplished. Not maybe in 5 years, but definitely in the future at some point. I think that would be something that I would really love to do, to really apply whatever I've learned in the process of becoming a better designer, a more experienced designer, to a branch of design that is towards people that are in need of help, as spaces that host situations that are maybe not the easiest.
Yeah, maybe something that we could call more meaningful, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think every bit of design is quite meaningful. I mean, I know that sometimes hospitality and high-end hospitality doesn't feel like it, but I always try to approach it in a very psychological way where the choices I make are educated choices that will help the guest in their stay, let it be if it's for disability, and try to ensure that even if it's not a disability friendly room, it still applies the same concepts, because sometimes it's not about, and what we forget for the most part is that it's not all about wheelchairs. That's not the only disability, and we really forget, once you apply, you comply with the regulations, you're fine. But then why not apply the same concepts everywhere so that every space that you design actually follows the same rules? So it's just more simple, because why not? Because sometimes it's really changes that are so little, that are so unnoticeable to you as a person, but so much more noticeable for another person. I think that's something that I'm really interested in, and something that I try to apply on the, daily when I design, but definitely something I would love to get more into.
That's really amazing, and I completely agree with you on the disability. Like, we always think about wheelchair, but what about people that can't see or that can't hear? They should be able to experience
Exactly.
the hotel industry the same way as the others, right? So there should be
Exactly.
things that are made for those catering for those people. A last piece of
Exactly.
advice?
Oh boy, piece of advice. I think I feel like I just don't want to repeat myself, but I think the core is trying to have fun and never feel like you've learned everything there is. And if you think you're not improving or learning anymore, leave wherever you are, whatever place you're in, and go somewhere else, because there's a whole world to what we do, and there's always room to learn. And if you're not learning in this very specific moment, it means you're just maybe outgrown the place, or maybe it's just not the right teaching method, or but I think it's really essential to not be stagnant in a situation or a place, or a branch of design. Maybe it's about changing and not doing hospitality anymore, but doing commercial, or so workplace. Sometimes it's that, or sometimes it's just the wrong studio or the wrong team. Sometimes it's just about, or the wrong part of, maybe it's not about doing technical design, it's about doing epiphany. Maybe that's something that it's just, there's so much to it. Really, you can learn everything there. You just can't potentially know everything.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you especially today that you've given time out of your day off and being in the park. We're watching a concert, so enjoy your time, please, and thanks a million times for giving us your free time.
Bye, have a good day.
Bye.